Hello everyone, welcome back to the TJOmega channel for day 1088 of our daily content grind, and it is time once again to discuss the top 10 toys of a particular year, and we're up to 2009, and you have no idea how much I am waiting for the day when stock photos in good quality are available for everything we talk about. But for now, we do have a very interesting selection. Universe 2 is well underway. We've got Revenge of the Fallen to talk about, because yes, despite my grievances, it does weigh heavily on 2009's lineup, as Transformers Animated was just about petered out by now, and Takara just now started producing brand new molds for Masterpiece. So we're in an interesting year. A year where I'm going to have to talk about some toys you probably would not expect, but we need to give them their due. So without any further ado, here are the top 10 Transformers of the year 2009, and we are going to start with a personal favorite that's probably not going to make your list. I might be a little bit biased here, but it's going to make mine for a few particular reasons, and that is going to be the Universe 2 take on Dinobot. Now, I know I'm probably sure I didn't list this one very high in my my Universe 2 ranking list, but hear me out. I do think it is a fun deluxe take on the Dinobot mold. I do think it's a fun usage of the design, as well as like just giving us a much closer replication of a raptor than the original Beast Wars attempt. It's got an underkibble on the chest, but I will take his arms folded up rather than his legs. So I put it high up because I do think there is a lot of clever engineering to it, like how they get the bones on the legs. That's kind of tricky. That's kind of cool. I like that he has normal hands for using other weapons, and I like that they can flip around to have his traditional clawed hands from the show. I like that, yeah, he has a faction switch gimmick to him. He can be Predacon, Maximal, or Blank for his Beast Mode. And yeah, I do like that it's just an overall clean take on the Dinobot design. Not perfect, but way better than what we had during Beast Wars. Now, the trick here is my one grievance with this toy has always been the color scheme, because Hasbro was lacking in Predacons for Universe 2.0 to pit up against Cheetor, so they decided to give him a more evil-looking color. Fortunately, 2009 also brought us the Henkei version, which means this is actually the top. This is the one I'm putting number 10. The one with show accurate colors, because they came out the same year and in different territories, so I can get away with that. Yeah, this is gorgeous. The paint job on this one is exceptional. The colors are perfect, and they actually had the bright idea. Henkei's chrome craze, which avoided being on the Beast, was kept to just his sword, or missile for his launcher, whichever you used it as. Point being, it's one of the few times Henkei Chrome actually worked and made the toy better. So yeah, technically I'm putting the Henkei version at number 10. Little bit of a cheat, but it's my list. I'll get away with it. One of the factor for some of the toys on this year's list is novelty, because Revenge of the Fallen certainly had a lot of novel figures, especially in its smaller size classes, which is why we're going to throw in Ejector. This thing is hysterical. He is so unique in Transformers, and I don't just mean the fact that he turns into a toaster, but I mean just like the gremlin aesthetic and the four arms, and he transforms in this really weird, fun way. It's just such a novelty of a toy. And then they go even further to make this like an even nicer figure with things like an actual string for the power cord. They didn't need to include a power cord at all. They did. I think that's hysterical. Yeah, as a scout class figure, it doesn't do a whole lot. And yeah, you're not going to get a whole lot of playability out of a toy toaster. I don't care. I love this little gremlin. And I think a lot of people do. Like, it seems to be one of the ones that gets one of the best reactions of any of the scout classes from that year. Granted, he's going to be the only one on this list because we got a lot of really good toys to talk about. But if I'm only going to include one, it's got to be the most unique one. It's got to be the one that stands out the most, and that is absolutely Ejector. Here's the one you're not going to believe. Here's the one I have to include on this list because on a technical level, it's just too impressive not to acknowledge. The novelty factor of it is too good not to acknowledge. Even though I hate these guys, we have to talk Skids and Mudflap as the ice cream truck. Look, this isn't supposed to work, so if you've never seen the toy before, the front half turns into Skids, the rear half turns into Mudflap. They replicate the opening scene of the movie where, yeah, for some reason they're sharing an alt mode and it's an ice cream truck. Not sure why, but it makes for a really novel toy. An extremely novel toy, and the fact that they are both like fully articulated figures once you separate them and transform them, that's a really impressive feat. I will give Hasbro a lot of credit for cramming this guy into a deluxe package. Of course, he would rank a little bit higher if putting him together was a little bit nicer. I remember having a lot of trouble with it. And if Mudflap came up a little bit cleaner. There's a lot of panel in order to make this work. But nevertheless, I will acknowledge this is done fairly well. And this is an idea that really shouldn't work, but it did, and it exists. And it's maybe the one piece of the twins I will still accept. One thing about Universe 2 is that in the Voyager scale, it's all repaints, mostly from Cybertron, which makes it a little bit weird. Like, we haven't been able to talk about Universe 2's middle size class this entire time. But in 2009, we get one bone that we can talk about, and that's Inferno, the sole new mold in the Voyager class in this lineup. It's a really dead solid figure. Now, he does suffer from a little bit of past designing, like he has the Energon hips that limit him a little bit. But overall, for a first attempt, for a modern Voyager Transformer toy, it's the first one since Classics, I think it does a really nice job. It's a more compact fire truck. It's a big solid red brick is what it is. Transformation is smooth. It's not overly complicated. It's just like a nice, just like get it done type transformation. Like no bells and whistles to it. It's just simple and easy to do. And because of that, it just ends up being a dead solid rock of a robot. And I will absolutely accept that. And he manages to do it fairly cleanly. He's got some panel left over hanging off the back of his shoulders, but it doesn't cast a bad silhouette. And it gets completely out of the way. Yeah, he's a fun little toy. And then you work in things like his launcher, which I like having that. It's like a water launcher. The interior being designed and sculpted in completely. And probably the best attempt at light piping I've ever seen, because it's done in translucent plastic with translucent blue paint on the front. All clear plastic, translucent blue paint. And that works brilliantly. Even in dim light, his eyes are always alight. Yeah, simple figure, but sometimes simple means you get to make a lot of really cool stuff happen. Here's one no one's going to agree with, but I'm putting it on the list because I've always had a soft spot for this design. I've always loved the look of it and the feel of it. Let's talk about the leader version of Megatron from Revenge of the Fallen. I know a lot of people are going to swear by the Voyager, and yeah, that's a cool one. And technically, yeah, the alt mode on that one is more representative of what he had in the movie. And he didn't have this like scrawny little twig arm that this one does. I don't care. I love how this one looks and plays. I love how brutal the tank mode looks. Like, it looks like the angriest version of Armada Megatron you could possibly create, right? I mean, I do love the look of this toy still. Like, it's one of the few areas of like the Bayverse designs where I will still give it credit. I really do like the look of this Megatron. And yeah, the gigantic death arm on the on one side, like, yeah, I mean, it's heavily gimmicked to do that, so it does lose a little bit of articulation on that side, but hey, a lot of these lost articulation because of all the gimmickry that they had, so I'm not going to hold it against it in this case. I'm mostly just judging it by the look, the feel. I like the transformation, and yeah, like, there's an even darker version. There's a black repaint that I may or may not want to track down at some point, but for now, I'm going to put this one maybe a little bit higher up on the list than it should be, but my list, so there, I really like this thing. 2009 was the year of alternity. With Binaltech completely done, they decided they wanted to do something similar, but on a smaller scale, feels more like a traditional Transformer. So I'm going to give the nod to the original Convoy released in this line. I do know it has a few design flaws, but I think what it does really, really well is on a technical level. This achieves something that the movie toys do without going to the complexity of the movie toys. He does feel like a squeezed down alternator. You know, a lot of the details, like the internals, are all still intact, but it's a genuinely complicated figure without being overly complicated, and it's just a really nice representation of the real world vehicle. You know, as I said, I feel like this toy is a technical accomplishment because it does feel like a more high-class Transformer. It's using die-cast in a decent way. It's using its part count and its engineering in a really interesting way. I kind of like how the seats inside become the forearms. That's kind of a neat little trick to get those factored into the toy. Yeah, there's a lot to like in this one. Admittedly, there's only so many molds in Binaltech. So, you know, in this line. But in this case, yeah, I think this one is the best one that I had experienced. So, at the very least, so Alternity has some kind of representation just for what it managed to accomplish in its size. I want to give it a nod, and I think this one is probably the most deserved. This was the last year for Animated's run at normal retail, and they did go out with some banger repaints, but new molds, very, very few. That said, one was very, very interesting and strived for a lot. Let's talk about Safeguard. Now, admittedly, modern times, currently, this toy does have some problematic elements to it, a lot of it having to do with the clear plastic. I'm judging it for what it was at the time, and at the time, this was really, really cool. So you had two very similar twin figures, admittedly very simple in their jet modes, and I do like that there's actual canonical fiction to explain why the jet modes are simple, because this is not something Autobots did. Autobots did not fly. Autobots did not have aerial modes. These were the first. But each of them on their own is a competent animated style Transformer, and they're all, you know, decently fun as that. But then you have the combination. For a long time, it's been batted around that this was inspired by Gal Gaigar's symmetrical docking. They have disputed that. So we're not really sure how they came up with the combination method, but the fact that it works as well as it does is a really special thing. It looks really, really cool. You know, I even like how they dealt with all the extra arms hanging off, because I like the X that they form on the back. And then you attach the fact that, yeah, you can combine the vehicle modes too. Kind of. They're just riding each other's bellies, but there is a little bit of play you can do to kind of make it a little bit more interesting. And that's another reason why I liked the set so much when it first came out. There's a lot of options you can do with it. And the fact that Hasbro put them in a 2-pack together means you could get those right out of the box. So yeah, there is a lot to like about this set. If you can find one where the clear plastic is holding up, yeah, I think there's still a lot of fun to be had on him. Masterpiece finally starts expanding. From here on out, we actually have to pay attention to this line. It's not just repaints anymore. But for their next entry, we've already gone through Optimus and Starscream and Megatron. So the next one up in the priority list, Grimlock. Look at how good he looks. Look at how good this toy looks. I love the features that they figured out for this figure. So things like the eyes in both Beast and Robot mode can be rotated around, so you can have toy or comic accurate red or original cartoon blue. You have the light up hand gimmick that they tried a few times in Armada and didn't quite work, but here it works well enough to actually pipe light into his sword or his gun to make it look like they are heated up. Combine that with just fun accessories. His helmet from creating from Grimlock's new brain, the apron and drink tray that he wore in one episode of season 3. It's just a lot of fun little things this toy can do. Now that said, I had the American version, and the American version kind of felt rickety to me. I don't know if the Takara one was the same, but I do feel like it's because this toy is a little over-gimmicked. You also have a gimmick where when you rotate the tail, the head will move left and right. When you push the toy down on its legs, the head will look up. So there's a lot of gears and a lot of things that are going into like the head, like all the way up the spine of this toy. And I think maybe that's what I got the rickety feeling from. Maybe to the detriment of this toy that it does so much. Later on, they would realize that gimmickry didn't really belong in Masterpiece, and they would kind of do away with it in favor of just making the toys as good as possible. We'll get into trouble with these lists once they do. For now, Grimlock is still a decent figure, and decent enough to where he will not only place third on this list, but he will still have us wondering where are the other Masterpiece Dinobots. Seriously, it's been 15 years. Alternators left something of a strange hole in the toy shelves, where I kind of liked getting these larger scale cars that felt more solid and substantial as figures. So Hasbro, having a moment of wisdom and realization, decided we're going to fill that notch and still do something different. We got Human Alliance, which was their idea of not only creating larger versions of these movie characters, but also incorporating the human cast as well. And I'm giving the nod to the original, the Bumblebee, with Sam Witwicky piloting him. Now, aside from the fact that you get the playability of Sam being able to not only ride in robot mode or mount the gun and sit inside the car, the toy itself just feels really, really nice. One of the big issues I have with so many movie toys is that to get movie-accurate transformations and detailing, they are covered with these small, fiddly parts that I really, really do not like. And because of that, like, they just feel like, I don't know, too fiddly, too flimsy at times. Upscaling them and making more of the parts out of the big bulk of the vehicle like he does on the legs solves a lot of that. This toy feels substantially better, and I don't feel like parts are going to fall off when I mess with this toy. Overall, like, I feel like this was like the high point. Admittedly, there's a couple out there, Barricades, Soundwave, that were very, very hard to get a hold of. So I don't know how exactly they felt in hand, but for the ones that I messed with, yeah, Bumblebee was absolutely the best and worthy of being the second best toy of 2009. But if we want the best toy of 2009, then I have to account for engineering accomplishment. We've already talked about that on the list, but here's where it really comes into play. Your top toy of 2009 is the Leader Class Revenge of the Fallen Optimus Prime, simply because this should not be possible. It really should not be. Look at that big block of a truck, and they somehow got all of that into an incredibly screen-accurate Optimus Prime. That's impressive. That's really impressive. Like, shockingly impressive. And there's an electronic box stuck in there too. Like, they even had room for that. It does an incredible job, and getting away with it with no cheats, like the what you see there as like the front on his chest, that's his actual windshield on the truck. Like, that's a real part. It's a really impressive job. A really impressive job. I will admit, I don't want to transform it again. Because this thing takes a long time to transform. There's a lot of steps to it. It's a very involved figure. How could it not be in order to accomplish what it's accomplishing? But I do think for the time, it is incredibly impressive to not only be able to produce screen-accurate Optimus Prime, but to work in electronic gimmicks, to work in his blade gimmicks on his forearms. Yeah, there's just a lot to like on this toy. And the fact that there's even room on it to start combining it with Jetfire, who also came out this year, but is not that great of a figure on his own. Yeah, it's an incredibly impressive job. I mean, absolutely easily takes the spot for the best of 2009. And there you go. Another top 10 where I had to be nice to Bayverse Transformers. It happens once in a blue moon. And I think the moon was blue recently. I don't know, I don't follow it. I just heard about it. Regardless, that's the list. Feel free to dispute it in the comments below, as you are wont to do. And as always, I will see you next time.